Welcome everybody, welcome to the Accountability Board. For those of you that have attended and those of you that haven't attended before, just a bit of a description of what's going to happen today. So obviously we'll go through welcome and apologies, but there will be a live section, and this live section is obviously recorded for the public. There'll also be a section where there'll be public questions, so if you can give your answers in full, would be greatly appreciated for members of the public. That would be fantastic. And then we'll go into a closed session, which will not be public. So you will be told when the camera is on and we are public, and you'll be told when the camera has stopped recording as well. So just to say thank you all for coming today. Welcome and apologies. I don't have any apologies today. In terms of the minutes and actions from the previous meeting that we've had, they've all been completed, and we have updates for absolutely everything that we've asked for, and their actions number 2547, 2548, 2549 and 2550 are now all complete and can be seen, and hopefully you've read the pack and you are aware of them. Today's agenda in terms of the public will be a general overview of a police and crime plan, and that will be from the Chief Constable, Steve Cooper. Then we'll be into delivering for our rural communities, which will be a presentation from Chief Inspector Clive Collins. And then we'll be delivering the Police Race Action Plan paper presentation from ACC Suk Verma. So without further ado, I will go to item number 3, and this is over to the Chief Constable, and this is a general overview of police and crime plan progress.
Okay, thank you. I've also got on my agenda about Catalyst, which I'll refer back to as well, if that's if that's okay. So in relation to Operation Catalyst, which was our response to being under HMIC engaged, obviously we are no longer an engaged force, but we are keeping the brand of Operation Catalyst in terms of our sort of preparation for, well, one, future inspections, but two, to make sure that we keep our focus on the service that we're delivering to victims and the services that we're doing in terms of our investigation and governance. Just by way of reassurance, which I know we report on through our monthly performance meetings, but we always used to say that sort of a target of above 95% would be good for victim updates, supervisory updates. I've literally just done a check with my calculator phone just there. We're at 97.5% for victim updates at the moment, and over 95% for the other two crime trends. So that's extremely positive. In terms of other key areas, starting with, if I can, sort of the calls going into the control room, we're consistently above, with minor fluctuations sort of across sort of peak periods of time, but achieving our core performance targets in relation to year-to-date data. So answering our 999 calls briefly. We've got the measure now that is under the 10 seconds repeatedly for several months in a row. The summer months always present a strain and a challenge, but we have plans in place to try and focus on the 999 calls in that respect. So our calls coming into the control room are doing extremely well. Investigation standards, which obviously link in with some of the other work that we're doing. The QUAT analysis that we're undertaking, still good scores in relation to that. We're still continuing on with our QUAT assessment. We're sort of averaging probably we're sort of, I won't say flatlining in a complacent way, but we've hit what I think is the good standard of investigations that we're consistently achieving at this point in time. So we're then going to focus on some of our other aspects around victim needs assessment to actually make sure that we deliver, according to the Policing Crime Plan, on our true victim needs bespoke levels of service. In terms of overall crime performance, looking particularly good. So crime in relation to most aspects, down against baseline, down year to date, which is probably the most important aspect that we're looking at now. So we do have some issues that we're still looking to focus on, but some other areas of policing, particularly sort of Mansfield, Nashfield, where crime, according to the sort of the neighbourhood crimes, are looking extremely positive. And some sort of early green shoots from our new approach to neighbourhoods, I think, are coming through. So generally overall positive. Our positive outcome rate remains good. Certainly in relation to some of our shop theft, and correct me when I get some of these data slightly wrong, but around 35% in relation to a lot of those figures, and we're sort of high 16s, low 17s when it comes to overall positive outcome rate in relation to all crime. So a generally sort of overall good performance in terms of crime reductions in most areas, not all, I'm not going to claim that in all, and a good positive outcome rate as well. File quality still remains positive, and our guilty pleas at courts, again, very positive, very reassuring.
Okay. Lovely, thank you for that. Just to note as well, I don't know if I've mentioned it previously, but really to, I suppose, congratulate the force in coming out of engaged status and doing it in such a short space of time. I know that having had many meetings with HMIC, FRS, the work that's been done to get us out of engaged status. And I suppose one of the highlights of that is that we've managed to do it in a 12-month period, which is really unheard of. But I think that's sort of, I suppose, attributing to all of the hard work that all of the officers that have played a part, and civilian staff who have played a part in making sure that we come out of that in as quick as time as possible, and obviously a credit to yourselves as well. So really just to commend you on that. And I know that from my point of view, it's about the building blocks, and now the foundations are now in place, and the arrow is pointing in the right direction. And I think we're starting to see the product of that with Nottinghamshire Police and moving forward. So there is some good news stories out there. The Home Office is looking at Nottinghamshire Police as being a force to be looked at, particularly with the neighbourhood policing model, and they're very encouraged by that. So I know there is more to come, where we will get more attention and looked at in certain areas, but let's keep up the good work and the work that's been done. Just to say, really well done, because it is a difficult situation to get out of. So that's just a credit, and we're pointing in the right direction now.
Yeah, thank you, and if I can just say thank you to yourself and your team, because like I say, it's the support and the resources that we needed are always there, so thank you very much.
No, absolutely brilliant, thank you. So that section is now over, so I shall go over now to item number 4, which is a presentation from Chief Inspector Clive Collins, and this is about our rural crime, rural communities. So over to you, Chief Inspector.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So I'll start with a little bit of an overview of Nottinghamshire as a county. 2/3 of Nottinghamshire is classed as rural, and within this force we have 46 different rural beats, so neighbourhood beats, which are either entirely or partly rural, which is a significant number. We have 25 PCs and 12 PCSOs that cover cumulative those 46 areas. Policing rural communities is challenging, sort of because of the scale and the relatively isolated nature of some of those communities. So from a policing perspective, we haven't necessarily got the intensity of policing resources that we might have in other parts of the county, which creates particular challenges, but obviously demand sometimes isn't there either. Rural and wildlife crime has been quite difficult to pin down in terms of defining it. So it's only very recently that nationally we've got an agreed rural crime definition and an agreed wildlife crime definition, both of which the force have now adopted. And some of the rural crime types that we see quite regularly are very different from some of the crime types in other parts of the county. So in terms of rural crime, obviously we have a number of different arterial routes through the county, the A1 being the prominent one. We see a lot of fuel thefts within that area, but also sort of plant thefts off farmland, some really expensive machinery that's there that can be stolen with relative ease and then disappears, and it very often ends up on the continent and further afield. A lot of Toyota Hiluxes at the moment, for some reason, are going to Africa, and that's something that we had a conversation with Toyota about last week in terms of target hardening sort of that particular type of vehicle. And then within wildlife crime, and it's sort of coming into that period now, a lot of poaching, hare coursing, that sort of thing, which obviously not only from an animal welfare is a particularly horrific thing, but also it can have detrimental effect on sort of the agricultural world and has an impact on sort of food and all that, and through the basically the damage, the destruction of crops. So moving on, and this is obviously based on the elements that were within your Police and Crime Plan, Commissioner. So looking at the 6 areas that you highlighted, so increased visibility and accessibility. So just to touch on some of the things we've done around that. We've increased our Hilux fleet from 1 to 4, so it's quadrupled in the last year or so, which obviously gives us more accessibility to some more remote areas. We have more rural and wildlife crime trained officers than ever. So I've touched on the number of rural beat managers we've got within the county. In terms of rural crime trained officers, we've moved that this year from 8 to 29, which obviously is a significant increase. And the details for every rural beat manager is now on our external website, which means that they're obviously increasingly accessible. A better understanding of what affects rural communities, so more rural beat surgeries, more barn visits and increased partnership working. It's something that we do intrinsically now. It's well built within the offer we've got for our rural communities, and it's working really well. We're getting lots of positive feedback, and one of the, I suppose, we're going through a period of sort of relative sort of contracting of police budgets, and one of the things that sort of provides us with an opportunity to do is work more with partners, and we're certainly finding that's bearing fruit.
Yeah.
In terms of two of the other areas, so enhanced communication and reporting channels, so we are using NOTS alerts increasingly, we're using social media increasingly and doing that more effectively all the time. We are producing a quarterly rural crime newsletter which goes out to people who are signed up to the NOTS alerts and within those rural communities. And we've got a dedicated email account now for rural crime, which means that people can contact us directly. Obviously not to report crime per se, but at least a direct line into myself or Juliet Webber, who's our partnerships manager. Targeted advice to tackle crime and ASB. We've got a dedicated rural crime prevention officer, that's Darren Kenworthy, who's a PCSO. He then, linking into the bottom one there, visits all repeat victims of crime within rural settings, which I think is a really good offer for people who are feeling particularly vulnerable and isolated and have been a victim of crime on more than one occasion. And a continued commitment to Operation Star. So OpStar is our work with South Yorkshire, Derbyshire, Lincolnshire. It's a cross-border operation that we run and use on a monthly basis, and it allows us to obviously pool our resources and some specialist resources that other forces might have that we haven't, or vice versa. We can use those as well. And the final two areas, so specialist training for rural and wildlife crime trained officers. We have 2 community-based CPD days a year, so continuous professional development. The most recent of those was with the Angling Trust, so we went down to a site in Newark, and it's just about for our officers that are trained within those areas, sometimes looking at relatively niche areas, I guess, of policing. It's not something you come across in the middle of Nottingham city centre, for example, but actually it's just increasing that awareness of some of the issues that those communities are facing and allowing us to tackle their issues more effectively. As I've mentioned earlier, we've increased the wildlife cohort from 8 to 29 officers this year, and we now have bespoke training for all new recruits, so an hour-long input for all new recruits and for contact management staff as well, to make sure that they're able to identify rural and wildlife crimes as they come in. We've also got now dedicated tags on our incident management system, which allows those to be tagged, which then we can definitely pick up and we can review to make sure they're being handled correctly. And then the best use of technology to deter and detect crime. You'll be aware that we've got now 2 drones which are almost ready to be given out to rural communities in Bassetlaw and in Newark and Sherwood. They've been purchased through the Safer for All Fund. The intention for those is to allow the communities to help police their own areas, but also to then potentially provide evidence for us of rural offending. Those drones have got incredible cameras on them, should capture good evidence for us, which means that we can then have a much better chance of detecting those offences. We've also invested in a number of trail cams which are distributed out to rural communities if they're having particular issues. They're covert and they will help to capture evidence, and likewise night vision goggles which have been provided to the rural community, again to help them to police their areas, which in turn helps us. Just a quick touch on a couple of challenges. I mean, cross-border criminality is a huge one for rural offending, and obviously we touch on it with the OpStar events that we do. There's 3 different elements there that are pictured. On the top right is a gentleman called Daniel Taylor from the Worksop area. He was found guilty in the spring of last year of a string of poaching incidents across a number of, I think, Thoresby, Clumber and Welbeck. He was convicted at court and sentenced to 2 years, 8 months in prison, which was a reduction of a third because of the guilty plea. He came out after 8 months. I was just being told prior to coming in here he's gone back to prison now because we've managed to get him breaching his licence, so he's gone back for the full term now. So he's out of the way for a significant amount of time. The five men below him were the subjects in an investigation called Upheadit, which is a joint investigation between ourselves and Lincolnshire. They were involved in serious acquisitive crime in Nottinghamshire and Lincolnshire, burglaries, theft of significant amounts of plant machinery. They were sentenced to 12 years imprisonment as a total after a year-long investigation between the 2 forces. At the bottom, that's obviously an exotic bird. We're seeing a significant increase in the importation of exotic birds from the continent. illegal wildlife importation is the fourth largest industry in terms of illegal importation in this country after firearms, people and drugs. The slight issue with illegal importation of birds and exotic wildlife is that the sentences aren't quite as severe as they might be for some of those. So a lot of organised crime groups are seeing the sort of the niche in the market there and looking to exploit that. We've got an investigation that's ongoing, so I can't say too much about it. But we've got a male who's on bail at the moment who we think has had over £500,000 through his bank account in 18 months, which is, I suppose, an indication of the sort of scale of that offending, and that is linked to other OCGs around the north of England. As I said at the bottom there, collaboration's key. What we are sort of finding with the sort of the number of resources we've got in comparison to, or working with South Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, Derbyshire partners, is that actually the way that we achieve best results around rural and wildlife crime is through working with our partners, working with other forces, pooling resources, because a lot of the crime that we are seeing is not, you won't be surprised to learn, doesn't stop at the border of Nottinghamshire and does have, is by definition sort of linked to other areas of the country, and quite often is across not just rural and wildlife crime, but links into serious organised crime in the city and elsewhere.
Yeah.
And that is the presentation.
Thank you very much for that very concise and precise presentation. John, have we got some questions from the public?
My name's Katie. I'm from here in Mansfield in Nottinghamshire. I actually work at Sherwood Forest, so I love the area. Last year I sadly lost my horse following a dog attack in his paddock, and I've been campaigning for various changes. My question is, are there any plans to build on the powers and the reaction times of the police force surrounding actual incidents with dogs and horses? There is a big issue in Nottinghamshire and wider, further afield, and we've been campaigning for the last year, so we'd be interested to know if there are plans for further training for officers, if there are any plans for reaction times to be improved, and to open a conversation with you. So we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. I'll start, and then obviously if you wish to come forward. Firstly, obviously, to Katie, very sorry for the loss of your horse. It's obviously very tragic circumstances. And if I can sort of try and reassure that we are taking steps to increase the level of training and awareness of the officers who are deployed. If you have listened to the presentation before, and I'm not sure if you would have captured all of it, but we now have 29 officers who are trained in relation to wildlife and rural crime. Some of the legislation is quite niche, so it is really useful to understand how they can actually get that added value. We've also trained our contact management centre staff so they can be aware of the offences, the aggravating factors, and deploy the necessary and appropriate resources. In terms of the speed of response, obviously we will prioritise wherever we can, but if the details that you've just passed on, obviously without knowing the specific cases, but please feel free to contact Clive to obviously talk through the specific case. We do look to prioritise where we can, obviously evidence where there's a serious offence ongoing, or there's a future risk, and obviously an out of control dog would usually fit one of those criteria, so we'd dispatch fairly quickly. In terms of our ability to influence changes in legislation, clearly as officers of the law, it's relatively limited to what we can do. But we are part and represented at both the National Rural Crime Unit and the Wildlife Crime Unit. They're both powerful bodies, influential bodies, and we can look to try and influence wherever we can there. And you mentioned having that conversation, and I'm sure that Clive, as the force lead for rural crime and wildlife crime, would welcome that. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you for that. Okay.
Hello, sir. I'm Jeff Edmund. I'm the RSPCA's National Wildlife Partnerships Manager in the Inspectorate, and I'm here today in Nottingham at the wonderful Rural and Wildlife Crime Action Showcase Day. And I really want to ask the question, I'm very encouraged today to see this engagement event going on, working with the community, really engaging with people and partners like ourselves. And we look forward to working in partnership with your Rural and Wildlife Crime team for the future. Can you reassure me that that will indeed happen, and that the team will be invested in, and we can look forward to building and strengthening our partnership working?
If I start off with a very quick answer of yes, and then I'll hand over to Clive to just give some of the more details.
So yeah, absolutely. With the Rural Showcase, where that question was recorded, It's something we do every year. The last couple of years we've done it at Rufford Park. We intend to continue to do that. We appreciate the engagement opportunity it provides, not only for members of the public, but also in terms of our partners, and it allows us to work closely with them. Partnership working, as I said within my presentation, is absolutely key, and particularly in a world where police budgets are under some degree of stress, I guess. So yeah, working with the RSPCA, working with other partners who are there on the day is critical. The other bit that I think is really important is getting out into the public. So Commissioner, you were at the Rural Showcase. You saw the number of people that were there, and obviously you were there. You saw some value in it as well. I think making sure we're out in the public, making sure we're accessible, making sure people can come to us and can talk to us is critical. And having partners there, the RSPCA and a number of others, is absolutely. It's pivotal in making sure that we're building those relationships. We obviously invested in a rural and wildlife crime partnerships manager. So Juliet Webber joined us in December. She's doing a fantastic job in building those relationships. So yeah, we are committed, and we will continue to be committed in making sure we strengthen those partnerships wherever we can.
I'd just like to add there as well that I think in relation to that question, in terms of the investment, it's really important to understand Nottinghamshire Police's offer in terms of rural crime. And if you look at our other forces, they don't have an offer anywhere near comparable to what Nottinghamshire offers. So Nottinghamshire, as you've just heard, offers 29 officers, and those officers are spread throughout our neighbourhood teams. And the NFU National commented on that offer and said that offer is probably the best offer in the country at this moment in time. Lincolnshire, a neighbouring force who we do work with, I think have 6 officers, and I think Leicestershire might have even less than that, 4 officers. So it's quite considerable, the offer that Nottinghamshire has, and just to reassure the public that rural crime is a priority of ours, and we are investing in it, and we are looking to make sure that investment is sustained. So I just wanted to add that. Clive, I just wonder if I can just bring you in just quickly, just to talk about a little bit about the fact that we have 29 officers. How does that really differ to our other forces? Obviously the numbers make a difference, but what we do is slightly different, I think.
Yeah, so Lincolnshire and Leicestershire, as you talked about, have both got very small dedicated teams. Whereas what we do is we've got officers that are embedded within communities, so they're rural beat managers effectively. The first slide that I showed sort of demonstrated the number of beats that we've got, and I talked about the number of officers and PCSOs that we've got within those areas. So the philosophy that we follow is the fact that our community officers are on the ground, they're engaging with communities all the time, they're gathering intelligence, and they are the point of contact for people. So if you live in Tuxford, for example, you know who your local PC, local PCSO is, and you've got contact details for them, which is quite significantly different from, say, Lincolnshire, who've got a team of 6 who cover the whole of Lincolnshire. So I suppose we are looking at it more from the perspective of having boots on the ground, local contacts for individual communities, and we see that as sort of the most productive and most effective way of policing and securing the safety of those communities.
Thank you for that, because I think it's important that is noted, that the offer that we do is very different to our sort of surrounding forces, and I think we get good results because of that. Okay, on to question number 3.
Hello, my name is Laura. I live in Old Ollerton, and my question for the Chief Constable is, rural crime is on the increase. What is the commitment from the PCC and Nottinghamshire Police giving to local communities, please?
Thank you. I mean, I think with rural crime, it's not a universal picture of it being on the increase everywhere. We have pockets where it's gone up, but we've also got other pockets within the county where it's coming significantly down. But anyone who's a victim of rural crime will, obviously understand the seriousness of that offence. In terms of what we are doing, and without obviously just repeating some of the previous questions, but we've significantly increased the number of wildlife and rural neighbourhood specialist officers, obviously up to 29. We also have a tasking procedure within our force, whereby when we get specific areas or hotspots of tasking, people can go and bid, and they bid into the meeting chaired by the ACC. And only recently we have had our roads policing and some of our territorial support group officers deploy into rural areas where we know that the crime pattern of rural crime has necessitated their response. So what I would say to people is, if they've got either information, intelligence in relation to what's happening in their local area, in those rural areas, please feed it in either to your neighbourhood officer, your local station, or if you'd rather do it anonymously, you can phone Crime Stoppers or do it through our online portal. Because the more information we get, the more direct we can make our patrols and the more effective they can be. In terms of the neighbourhood uplift that people have seen in relation to the recent government announcement, some of our uplift locally is going into rural areas, so that will again increase the footfall. And we're also making sure that when we start to have our cross-border areas, because as Clive mentioned in his presentation, the problem that you have in a rural area is that the borders go in and out of various county areas, so we have a really good offer with our neighbouring officers, whether that's in South Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, Derbyshire, to actually target cross-border criminality, to make sure that those people who do cross borders committing offences don't simply just stop at the border. We will follow them into those neighbouring forces and they'll follow them into ours. So we make sure that we do bring offenders to justice. And obviously people can go back and see the presentation that Clive gave us, some good success stories within that sort of show that we take it seriously.
And as the PCC, for me, we've obviously just spoken about it with regard to having the extra officers that are based in our communities, which means and gives and delivers a hands-on service, which I think is really important to our rural communities. There's improved training for our contact management staff as well on areas of rural crime and the offences that are committed through rural crime, because they are specialist. Also the equipment we have in terms of the 4x4 and the investment of 4x4 vehicles and technology now with the drone system. Two drones hopefully coming in online and into service, which will really help and support some of our rural communities with some of the issues that they have, particularly with those who do a lot of off-road biking on some of our farmers' lands. It will really help support some of the work that needs to be done around that. There's a real strong focus on prevention, which is an event I know that Laura attended. We're really keen to get out there, talk to our rural communities and really communicate the work that we're doing and the resources that we have, so that they can understand that a little bit better, and also communicate some of the successes that we have and some of the operations that we are doing in our rural communities, which sometimes aren't extremely well known about. And I suppose at the end of the day, it's about collaboration and working together and making sure that everybody is informed. That I'm holding the chief to account in the sense of making sure that the service is delivered and that delivery is of a high standard. So that's the end of questions from the public. So over to you, Clive, again. Just a few questions around some of the rural agenda. I suppose, how are we ensuring that the good work being done in this area is effectively communicated to rural communities? And I ask that question because one of the things that was pointed out to me is that we have a better offer on paper than probably every force in the country, but I don't think that message, or the message of the work that we do, is necessarily getting out of there. And I know that you've touched on the fact that we've now got brought certain members of staff in. I just wonder if you could just explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so we're working to improve the sort of feedback towards our communities, because I'm very conscious that if we're going to improve and build trust and confidence within those rural communities, absolutely they need to understand what we're doing and they need to see the successes that we have. So I touched within the presentation about the quarterly rural crime update that Juliet's writing now. So that is a feedback loop there. We're also investing increasingly in social media, so we're doing more and more around the social media. We've got a dedicated member of staff within our corporate comms unit now, who's our Spock, and we have fortnightly meetings with her to make sure that we're capturing upcoming investigations or the conclusion of investigations. And then on top of that, we are working with Knots Alert, so increasingly trying to get people signed up. You'll have seen at the Rural Showcase that we were actively trying to get people signed up to Knots Alerts. Again, with Knots Alerts, that's our direct linking from the force to people to provide them with updates on either crime types that are happening in their area, but also to be able to provide them with updates on investigations and the successful sort of conclusion to those investigations. So a mixture really. Appreciate we've still got work to do around it and appreciate the importance of it. What I'd say is it's work in progress, but it's absolutely something that we are improving and we will continue to improve going forward.
Great. And just on the back of that really is, Yeah, I think you've kind of touched on it. Can you sort of describe a bit more how we're taking the views of our and concerns of our rural communities and how we're sort of trying to make that have an effect on the policing that we deliver for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So on top of events like the Rural Showcase, we do a number of different, I've been involved in a number of different barn visits, which is essentially a group of farmers or landowners within a particular rural community coming together. I'll sit down with them, they'll explain to me what they think is great and what they think is not so great about the service that we're providing. That obviously gets fed back in. With a dedicated email address, that's a line of communication into the force as well, so they can provide feedback or concerns they've got within those communities. We've got a dedicated rural crime prevention officer, again a means by which there's that feedback loop from the community back into us. So a number of different methods, and we're trying to sort of make it as broad an offer as possible and do it in a number of different forms, which means that it's easy. So if somebody's not on the internet, for example, somebody in a rural community isn't sort of particularly tech savvy and isn't on the internet, they're not left behind, because I think I'm very conscious that there's the potential for that to happen. So we look at technological advances and we're looking at ways by which we can improve that from that perspective, but also looking at more traditional means of communication as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Also, another question for you really, just around sort of like the evidence of the connection between domestic violence and abuse of animals. And I think because of Nottinghamshire's offer, we have officers that sit in neighbourhood teams, which I suppose helps link into the domestic violence world and what we can do on that agenda. Just really, could you talk around how that sort of links and how maybe we've acted upon some of that information?
Yes, there is a statistical link between people who abuse animals and they will also abuse people. I think that's a proven link. So if you take that to its natural conclusion, you would say quite obviously there are people who are involved in poaching, for example, or hare coursing, that are potentially involved in domestic violence as well. I think there are also a lot of stresses on certain rural communities, a lot of pressure given, varying climates, for example. You're talking about businesses that are very weather dependent, and with pressure sometimes for a small number of people will come sort of the stresses that will then bring potentially domestic violence, for example. We've seen that, absolutely. Yep. And then other pressures including, we definitely, have seen in the last few years potential self-harm and suicide among some farming communities. Different people handle those pressures in different ways. So we are constantly dealing with, working with people like Dave, who's got the Vogue agenda around actually how can we sort of help to prevent domestic violence within those communities, and then domestic violence, or use the knowledge we've got of domestic violence in some other communities to help to steer some of the work we're doing around the abuse of animals as well. So there is an absolute link, and that's statistically proven. And I think there's two parts to it. There is the domestic violence within rural communities, and there's the domestic violence of people who then go in to commit offences in rural communities. And we are very mindful of that, and we work with Dave and his team to help to sort of close that loop.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Right, are there any questions from anybody else in the panel?
Just following that up, Clive. So are the 29 officers also trained in spotting the signs of domestic abuse in rural communities?
Yeah, so there's a sort of an overlap really. There's 25 PCs and 12 PCSOs that are the rural beat managers, and there's 29 wildlife crime officers as well. So some of the wildlife crime officers are based around the city, because it won't surprise you to learn that some of the people involved in some of the sort of the organised crime group activity that we talked about in terms of illegal importation of animals are city-based and aren't necessarily rurally based. So there's a bit of crossover. So actually, in fact, we've probably got a greater number, because there will be some rural beat managers who are wildlife crime officers, but some that aren't. So the number is probably significantly greater. And as part of the CPD days, we integrate the domestic violence element of it into that as well. Yeah. And within the rural and wildlife crime strategy, there's also an element around help for rural communities in terms of quality of life issues and being mindful around the increase of suicide within rural communities. There's that feeling of isolation. So all those kind of what you probably wouldn't intrinsically think were rural and wildlife crime issues, but touch on other elements of policing. We're very mindful of that, and we train in that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Angela?
In terms of the domestic violence and the cruelty to animals, and it's great that you work with David and his team, do you actually signpost to other organisations within the city for them to get that additional support? And also, is there anything around suicide for men to get support for them? Do you signpost outside the force?
Yeah, so although the NFU obviously is a National Farmers Union, the NFU offer a service which is linked not only to domestic violence but also to sort of suicide risk and that sort of thing. So with through our links with the NFU, we access a service that helps to allow people within rural communities not only to get advice if they're suffering with poor mental health, but also to signpost people in the event of potential domestic violence or sort of emerging domestic violence issues. So we access a service through the NFU. You know, we're not beholden to that. So if there are other services and we feel people would benefit from them, then we'll signpost elsewhere. But we just have a really good sort of service through the NFU, which helps to close that loop.
I think it's probably worth saying as well that this is over and above our sort of generic offer.
Yeah.
So all of our staff are trained to know it, stop it, spot it, stop it, as well as all the referral mechanisms that we have through the public protection notices. That goes on, and then this is in addition. So it's the generic offer is there all the time.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. So on that then, I can close now on rural crime. Can I just thank Chief Inspector Clive Collins for your input, very informative and very concise. Thank you very much. Right, we move on to item number 5, which is delivering the police race action plan, and I will hand over now to ACC Sukhverma.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is a presentation in regards to the race action plan and where we are in regards to the programme here locally in Notts, but wider also nationally. So just taking you on to the why. So 2022, the NPCC published the race action plan in its first iteration. Its intended direction of travel is to build an anti-racist police service, and we're aware of that through the work that has been undertaken locally, but also from the National Board. There is a distinct National Board, which I'll come on to in a short period of time. Why? People in this increasing polarised world ask questions as to why do we have to have a race action plan, and it's probably a sad indictment of society that we do need one. But significantly, when we look back over the history of policing, linked to some seismic reports at periodic times, which include Scarman, Macpherson, Lammy, Casey, to name but a few, it is highlighted that the pace of change has not been significant or fast enough to secure the confidence of black communities. And within Nottinghamshire, we do have a sizable amount of black members of the public who we need to make sure that we support and take on the journey with us, which is why this work is of great importance to me and to the Chief Constable. So we've undertaken a bespoke local race action plan. We've taken the national plan, digested it, and I'm going to take you through a bit of a journey as to what we've done, to how we've sought to improve our organisation and the work that we take outside in creating sustainability. So on the screen that you can see, there are 7 commitments on the left-hand side. Those 7 commitments underpin everything that we do. They are now a centrepiece of the work that we undertake with our SLTs from all corners of the business, and also when we're making decisions that we always refer back into our commitments to ensure that we maintain that. If you are going to achieve something, you need to have a strong value set, and I believe it's extremely important for us to do so. On the right-hand side of the screen, as we look at it, it might be the left if you are looking at it on the television, but you'll notice that there are 4 work streams. Those 4 work streams are critical in order for me as the strategic lead to hold those individuals to account in terms of the delivery. We've digested this in a way that we feel is appropriate to deliver the best success that we can. They are represented. We want communities to see themselves when they look at policing, and that will become a little bit more apparent as we go through it. We have to change the representation, the retention, and a change in our internal culture, and that particular work stream is led by Claire Salter, who's our head of HR. Not over police. This was predominantly around powers and disproportionality. We need to treat our communities fairly, with respect and dignity, and eliminate racial bias. It's a challenge that permeates across use of force, stop and search, vehicle stops, etc. So there's a lot of work in regards to that particular strand, which is led by Chief Inspector Stephen O'Neill. Workstream 3 is involved we need to get greater involvement with police by consent. That is our ultimate mandate when we are working in British society as policing, and we'll only be able to fulfil the needs of our communities by listening, engaging and improving the way that we do business. This particular work stream was formerly led by Chief Inspector Carl Thomas, who departed the force on promotion. We wish Carl all the very best, and that has now been replaced by Chief Superintendent Nick Waldron, who works to me. And finally, not underprotected, this is very much around the crime strand, making sure that all members of the communities feel safe and get the most appropriate service, and this is led by ACC Leona Skur when she took it up in her former role as the head of crime. So I just want to give yourself and the audience an update as to where we are now. So from a local perspective, you can see the team in the far left of the screen, and below that we've worked hard with our corporate communications team to make sure that the information is visible and accessible through SharePoint and internet pages, so people can see the varying amount of work that's been undertaken and understand about elements of success. The centrepiece of the screen is around the regional work. We're the first region nationally to pull together those forces that border each other, that have got the same problems, the same challenges, and the same desire for success. So we now have an East Midlands Police Race Action Plan Forum, which the National Police Race Action Plan team and Dr. Alison Hidari, who leads that, has commented about how well that is working. What we're seeking to do through that board is create greater consistency, share best practice, and understand about what more we can do. So I'll give you a broad example, PSD for example. We know that there's perhaps a differing level of assessment of misconduct dependent on areas, and we need to create that consistency so there is fairness and transparency. On the right hand side, we were inspected recently by the national team led by Dr. Alison Hidari, as you can see in the centre of the photo. They came into Nottinghamshire for a half-day input where we went into great detail about what we've done. They have subsequently fed back to us an initial report, and in that report they've discussed around what they feel is innovative practice from Nottinghamshire, what we're doing well, but also some areas that we might want to adopt from other forces, for instance. And finally, the final element on the screen is the maturity matrix. The maturity matrix is something that the ISOB, which stands for the Independent Scrutiny and Oversight Board, which is led by Ambimbola Johnson nationally, and the ISOB have been pushing particularly hard for a national matrix to hold all police forces to account, a single method of assessment, so to speak. We're in a very fortunate position in Notts because when I took this particular portfolio over 2 years ago, I developed what was called the gap analysis. I looked at detail at the report as what we needed to achieve to be successful. Actually, a lot of that has manifested itself into the maturity matrix, as you can see. So the work that we've undertaken is to see the transferable elements from the gap analysis into the matrix and what other areas are new and fresh. So I just want to talk you through some of the key achievements. There's many more achievements than this, and I recognise that I'm restricted with time. So in terms of local workstream number 1, which is very much around our internal culture, you'll notice that Black History training is there. We have trained over 3,500 members of the workforce in detailed Black History training, which is performed and led by Nigel Best. That training has been identified as best practice nationally, and other police forces, including the West Midlands and also Greater Manchester, I believe, have sought to bring this into their particular workforces. Feedback from this training has been really positive, whereby participants who don't really understand why the race action plan is really important and go away enlightened, and they start to understand some of the historical context as to why we need to do more about listening to our communities and acting in a different way. That is actually mandated now in the maturity matrix, and the ISOB report that's recently been produced only 2 weeks ago, so it doesn't feature into this presentation, or I think it might only be a week ago, actually talks about every force mandating Black History training. The second element is about the production of reports. You might wonder why that is an innovative thing. It's not, but we didn't used to do it. We need to know and we need to understand around elements around stay surveys. Why are people deciding to stay or not deciding to stay? There's a lot of work that we need to undertake about ethnicity pay gap reporting and analysis. We know that there's a disparity, but we need to bring it into the fore. exit survey data. When people leave, do we allow them to leave the service with dignity, and do we actually get the data and the information about what is good but where we need to improve? PSD data is a big thing. That is a big challenge nationally for us around perceived disproportionality and perhaps some existing bias in decision making, and we need to ensure that we know what is happening within our four walls here at Nottinghamshire, and wider work that we're doing around our black workforce, which was a commitment we made historically under the 4 rooms work stream. The final thing is the Leadership Academy. We have now embedded inclusive conversations, cultural awareness training and respect for all. These 3 programmes are starting to make a difference, and we've noticed that there are some officers that have decided to stay in policing that have cited the success of those elements as being important for their voice to be heard and to make sure that things that have occurred to them, as indeed have happened to me in my career, don't happen to other people. I just want to talk you through the importance of the work in Workstream 1. If you look to your left-hand side in 2022, there's 126 complaints, public complaints, into the service around the activity and behaviour of our workforce. You'll notice that that's gradually reduced over the years. That's because we're putting more work, I believe, into cultural etiquette training, competency training, and making sure that civility and standards are central to what we do. We treat the public with respect, and we make sure that every contact leaves a good trace. However, this particular slide is something that we need to be cognizant of. The percentage of our black and ethnic minority officers, which we know was celebrated during the uplift era, where we attained figures of over 7.3%. Macpherson in '99 said every police service should be aiming for 7%. You'll notice that there's been a slight decline, and that is an area of business that I'm holding Claire Salter to account to understand what more are we doing in regards to the pipeline. You'll notice on Friday at police headquarters there was a mini police day. There's a lot of work that our colleagues in the hub are doing around engagement. It's about how we connect the pipe and how we do more work with our communities to make them realise that actually policing is a service where they wish to be. Local work stream number 2, that was the powers board, if you remember, or the powers aspect, if you remember. So what have we done which is quite significant? Well, the first thing is section 163 mandatory recording for Road Traffic Act stops. This goes back to Macpherson 99. Not all forces were doing this. We were one of the first forces to bring this in. Yes, it's another administrative burden, the workforce will tell me, but it's important that we understand whether we are utilising our powers fairly and whether they then ultimately manifest into either positive outcomes or complaints. We need to make sure that we use our powers wisely, and this is something that we've brought in, embedded it into Power BI, and it feeds into our Strategic Powers Board. Something that I know, Commissioner, that your side of the House as well as ours are particularly proud of is the Independent Community Scrutiny Panel, which is independently chaired by Dion Rose. The feedback loops that has given us is quite significant. You'll notice that they will select independently chosen incidents of stop and search. We have nothing to do in terms of the selection of those. That is down to the panel. Then they will go into detail about everything that we've done as to whether it's been legal, proportionate, appropriate, necessary, and interactions. You'll notice that out of that, green stands for good. 11 were cited by that panel independently as green, 2 amber where there was learning which is fed back to the officers, and 1 which was cited as red. That is over a 12-month period. So for me, I think that's quite a sizable shift in terms of independent oversight, transparency, and ultimate legitimacy, I feel. And then the final one that I just wanted to touch upon on work stream number 2 is the Powers Board. We have now woven in a proportionality calculator where we can understand about our use of force, our stop and search, whether we're proportionate or disproportionate. What is important to say is that over the last 4 years, we have seen a reduction in disproportionality in both use of force and stop and search, and we've also seen significantly in stop and search a reduction in the use of that power. There's 1,000 less stop and searches that were done in 2024 than in 2023, with a positive outcome rate of 40%, which has been particularly pertinent when we've been dealing with major and critical incidents such as operational listing, for example. Local work stream number 3, which is around about the involvement of our communities. We reformed our independent advisory groups post Operation Hendricks. We now have a strategic IAG which is independently chaired in 9 subgroups, and one of those subgroups is very well attended from the black communities. It allows us to have a wider reach into seldom heard communities. The Race Action Plan, whilst it's written predominantly for our black communities, it also affects other minority communities as well. And it's important that we get that sense of understanding through. And the new IAG model, as you can see, we've now had 4 strategic IAGs and 20 sub-IAG meetings. The next one that you can see down there is the majority of black-led churches custody pastoral support. That work has been picked up by the National Race Action Plan Forum as really innovative practice. The NBLC have been long-standing supporters of us. They recognise the work that we have and are going to continue to do. As you can see, that 62 detainees, often black, often first-time entrants into custody, they receive pastoral support, independent, separate to the judiciary system, independent of what we do. Out of that, you can see almost 70% of those individuals that's had that support, understanding the fact that we are a socially and economically deprived area, have not gone on to reoffend. I think that's quite impressive statistics. And again, the National Race Action Plan Forum have taken that away and wish for us to speak nationally about that. And finally is the importance of our neighbourhood policing approach. You know, Commissioner, that we've reformed our neighbourhood policing model, and one of the key strands of that is community engagement. Irrespective of where we are, irrespective of the plan, it is a strategic aim and it's a strategic objective to make sure that we engage with our communities. And as we have seen, and I'm not going to go into the specific details on them, but we've had a number of incidents whereby we've mitigated wider community challenge because of the strength of connection that we've got. I'm a big believer in localism, as you know, in policing, and it's a powerful tool when performed correctly. And the final one, which is workstream number 4, which is very much around crime, data reporting. We've developed now a Power BI Race Action Plan app. Every single senior leader now has access to that, where they can look at key information. There's some particularly worrying information that we've gleaned since we've had that, which is that black victims are 39% more likely to become a victim of violence against the person than white. So the question is so what? What are we going to do about it? That sits within the Head of Crimes portfolio. We've been working through with our community groups, with survivors, understanding what more we can do, particularly through our operational performance meetings, to tune into that particular challenge, understand vulnerability, know it, spot it, stop it, but know it, spot it, stop it from the point of the Race Action Plan. Touching very quickly, you've already seen the disproportionality calculator, but that now is a centrepiece of the OPR meeting, so we can understand about where we are disproportionately letting our communities down and or where we need to improve our service. And the final thing that I wanted to touch upon is it is actually good that we've focused and put a lens onto it, because with immediate justice, which is something that we're grateful for the support to continue that programme, where we now support those the immediacy of justice as opposed to waiting for the criminal justice system and the traditional format. But you'll notice that within immediate justice in the pilot, we have disproportionately put more young black suspects into that programme, where we know that there is a higher chance of no further reoffending. The proportionality in terms of reoffending rates is significantly better, and as you can see, 2.6 is the ratio that we put into that model. So it can be used to provide data back around where we are being positive as well. So what's next? Very quickly, we need to work particularly hard around recruitment, retention and progression. It's a challenge nationally for policing. We need to make sure that we can get it right, and there's a lot of commitment, certainly from myself and the Chief Constable and the wider senior leaders in the organisation, to make sure that that pipeline is unblocked and people can see themselves in this service in whatever role. We need to enhance the support that we provide to minority communities. Just like we discussed with rural communities, we need to make sure that we're connected in. I'm grateful to Angela as a Deputy PCC for support in terms of connectivity as well. And the aim might be slightly utopian, but it's an aim for an inclusive culture where people can come to work and feel that they can bring their whole authentic selves and not feel that they have to disappear. The other ones are certainly in work streams 2, to improve training, to ensure cultural competence, recognition, and improve the recording and the accuracy of our data as it comes in, because we need to make sure that every single record is coming in and is analysed properly. In terms of work stream 3, external communications, community groups, we know we can do better. I know that our communications plan can be cleaner, they can be more targeted, and that's some work that I'm doing through the IAGs and the ISOBs to work out how we can do that better. We want to make sure that we remain legitimate to our communities, irrespective of who they are, and we need to work hard around our preventative strategy to support black victims of crime in particular. And finally, for Workstream 4, we need more data, we need to put more analytical capability into it to make sure that our delivery and outcomes is better. I am pressing those Workstream leads. We've now got a new head of crime in terms of Rich Bull, and I'm making sure that delivery of service and how we deal with victims of crimes and offenders is improved. And finally, something which we know through a lot of our mental health work with the Coroner's Office, but also with our teams here at headquarters, is around what more can we do around crisis and vulnerability intervention. It is mentioned a lot during our mental health and safeguarding boards that there's a disproportionality of service, and it's about a whole systems approach and bringing everyone to the party so that we can work together and collectively better to support. And I know Michelle's been in those meetings with the CSPs and the partners, whereby by streamlining it and by getting slightly better information flows, we certainly can support our communities in the future. So that concludes the short presentation that I wanted to give you as to where we are. There's significantly more data I could talk about, but I'm conscious of time, so thank you.
No, that's really good. Thank you very much for that, sir. So let me just first off start off by saying thank you, and I say thank you because what I see and hear from you is honesty, and we can't deal with this unless we're honest about the journey travelled, not only by Notts Police but also by the communities and the relationship with Nottinghamshire Police. And I welcome that open and honest and transparent information in terms of the facts and the hard facts. And if something is shouting out and saying actually it's wrong, we're actually looking at that now and we're saying, you know what, we need to actually deal with that. It reassures me that that's not being brushed under the carpet and we're hiding it away because it's a problem. We're dealing with our problems and trying to work through them. When we look at the larger government agenda, part of that agenda is about how are we dealing with this now. And when we talk about violence against women, we talk about misogyny and all of the things that are linked to these type of actions. It's really important that we're open and we say it as it is and just deal with it. So I thank you for that, because that does come across when you're speaking, that honesty. It's really pleased to see that you've got a great participation with the Black History training and some of the effects that might be having on some of the officers who are learning something out of it. And I'm a great believer in, even if it's a bad experience, it's an experience that you've had and you've taken something out of that, whether that be good or bad. Obviously, you've got the ongoing work where you're really sort of like pressing home with getting this into the organisation, and you talked about the utopian model of everybody being able to bring their full self to work and being able to be comfortable in their own skin, as it were, and be themselves, which is when we get the best out of them as an organisation in terms of policing and our communities. So that's really, really important. And also some of the diversionary schemes that you talk about in terms of our communities and the IJ. I'm a great fan of the IJ system, and I think that it really sort of demonstrates that individuals have gone through a process but also come out the other side of that process and learn. And having spoke to a lot of the individuals who use the IJ system, they see it as a win-win, maybe doing 3 hours, maybe doing 7 hours of community service in the local communities has given them time to think and reflect and actually say, you know what, despite what I did there, some good has come out of it and I feel better for doing it, to be fair. And it saves in the criminal justice system, which is a win-win-win. So that all being said, there's clearly work to do, and we've got to press on. And we've really got to sort of like put our foot to the metal with regard to this and representation and how we look and how we feel. And individuals going through promotion, the promotion process within the force is really important. A few questions for you. What difference is the Police Race Action Plan making to our black communities? And how is this progress being communicated to our communities? How are we giving that feedback?
So we have a robust external communication strategy. The challenge that I pose to our communications team is how deep is that reach? And the sort of the challenge that I present to myself is if we put a story out in regards to it, is it going to penetrate into the areas of the community that we need it to penetrate into? I feel that through the community advocates that we have now, particularly with the IAG, which is bespoke to the black community, in addition to that, the majority of black-led churches, in addition to that, the work that we've got around youth outreach, we are finding that actually a far more successful strategy is by personal briefings, by actually going to those particular events, those groups, and briefing people about what we're doing, because to see a newsletter or to see an update sheet from the police doesn't quite have the same feel. We tried that and we failed in the early days because it just wasn't penetrating through. I guess also, Commissioner, in answer to the question, what we're finding as well, and I think an ultimate vision of success is where we no longer just talk about everything in the Race Action Plan banner, where it's actually just naturally success in policing. So, for example, the IJ process, we never actually put that under the banner of the Race Action Plan. It's just successful work under IJ, and it's been able to decipher out actually what elements are pertinent to the Race Action Plan, so we can record it and feed it back to the national, but also what we need to present to the communities. So, in answer, we need to continue to keep talking to our communities. We need to keep briefing them. We need to get into our cars and getting into those community centres. We need to make sure that they listen to us. And a sign of success is actually the amount of emails and phone calls that I get from the community myself, interested in continuing to do work. You'll notice that we've also got a lot of success and traction with mainstream media. So, for example, the custody pastoral scheme was covered by East Midlands Today, when we brought in lots of our communities to look at our revised UDT training process, where we put more cultural competence into it. That again made the Tea Time News. So I'm really supportive of the of utilising mainstream media where we can get that message out far wider. There is also a bit of work that we're going to take through the regional Race Action Plan group that we've got about what more we can do from a regional level around communication, so we're not duplicating efforts.
Okay, thank you for that. One of the things that I'm very keen on is making sure that we look and feel like our communities. So I know that you've mentioned Claire Salter and the recruitment and retention of people from the black community. I suppose in essence, what are we doing to maximise those opportunities that we have?
So there's a lot of work that goes on in regards to positive action outreach. There's a lot of work that the team do downstairs here at headquarters in connecting out. Where I feel that we can perhaps improve further is around connecting in engagement together with recruitment. That's how we were so successful during the Uplift model, was by putting the two things together, hand in glove, because they naturally have a byproduct. Now, the feedback that I had from the mini police day, which involved a lot of inner city schools coming here on Friday last week, is that the school teachers have heard already from those pupils that the police were historically, prior to Friday that is, the police was something that they'd never even factored in their minds as a future career. They didn't, the feeling of actually considering themselves even joining the police is something that had never crossed their minds. Whereas after the event and after that engagement event, they've gone home and they've been enthused. That's where we need to put more effort in, is in terms of making sure that we can get out there. I've got to let the neighbourhood policing model settle to enable that the deep-rooted community cohesion and engagement strategy take place, and it's not going to be an overnight win. I am as disappointed as anyone, and the Chief Constable will vouch for that, I'm fairly vocal at our meetings where I think that we ought to and can do more, not only as a local service but nationally. It is a national problem, this, and the only way that we're going to succeed in it is by connecting better with the public, making sure that they see the very damn best of us, and making sure that in every interaction that we have, we are superb and we leave no stone unturned. We need to make sure that we legitimise ourselves beyond belief. But I do believe that we can win this, and people like myself are a lived example of people of colour that can achieve significant ranking, and hopefully if we can start to role model and use them springboards that we've got, people can see that this is an industry and a job whereby everything that they historically read in reports and through news articles is perhaps not the truth. But there's a lot of work to be done. Also, the final element that we need to look at is the cultural element of recruitment in policing. I was historically connected to it through leading the Uplift programme for the force, but at the moment the entry programmes to policing require either formal qualifications, degrees, or a significant length of time, we knew back in 2019 that that particular length of process would turn off certain communities. We also knew that there was a perhaps slightly bigger challenge in terms of perception of wanting to come and do a degree in policing when actually they wanted to see whether there's a wider, more holistic opportunity that they've got. I don't think that we've quite got it tuned in yet from a national recruitment point of view and a cultural point of view. And in terms of what is potentially blocking certain people wanting to come in and join the service, it's a bit of work that I've spoken with the National College and the Chief Constable about, but we need to identify ways and means of influencing the entry market into policing, because a one-size-fits-all approach is certainly not going to work for diverse and different communities.
I think. Sorry,
go on.
I was just going to add that the only today the National Race Action Plan team have sent out a call for evidence to actually look at who around the country has done something either innovative, I'll say good. I don't think anyone's done anything outstanding by any stretch of the imagination, but who's got some good building blocks that we can go on. I think we've done some fantastic work in Nottinghamshire, but it's nowhere near good enough. So if we can just get another percentage point improvement from a neighbouring force, another one from another area, or because they've got a far reach, something from outside of policing and looking wider at the civil service or private enterprise. Because I think there is still a lot more we can do, but I would say that what it's not is about lack of energy, lack of effort, lack of trying. So we just need to now look at those next best steps to give us those marginal gains. We started mini police probably 7 years ago, and I always said to the first cohort that I went to open the very first session that we did, I look forward to seeing you in a few years' time joining the police. So we've probably got another 2 years, and I might see the first mini police coming through. But I think it is that sort of maybe not quite generational, but it's that's how long we've sort of been investing in this longer term strategy.
Okay.
And that's where the issue is, rather than officers, staff leaving the organisation once they join. So it is definitely in recruitment that you've slipped back. Or is it? Are you getting things from the exit and stay questionnaires?
No, I would say it's probably a bit of everything. So we've recently seen a number of our officers leave, but the majority tended to be on career progression, specialisation, or through choice, which great, but selfishly not. But we have seen also a bit of a slowdown in terms of recruitment, certainly from the sort of 2020-2021 recruitment cycle. And again, so we're looking at what's changed, what's the difference, how can we look to improve. So it's probably a combination of all of those factors building up to that.
There's also just a very brief point that I think is worth raising, that naturally staff roles have always been a good breeding ground for officers, and as staff roles start to slow down as well with the economic climate, that makes the challenge even more difficult. But this is not exclusive to policing, as I mentioned to you, Commissioner. The event that took place in Nottingham over the weekend, the same issues exist in professional sport in terms of refereeing, for example. They have got the same problems in terms of representation. It's about how do we work together smarter, and we don't just need to look at what's going on within policing. We need to look at what's going on in other industries and take best practice and work together, because there is inherent symmetries across, and I think that's where we will absolutely maximise our opportunity.
No, thank you for that. There was a question I was going to ask about the state, but that's fine. How inclusive are the forces IAG networks? And we've touched on this about in terms of their broad appeal. Are we linking in with every community that we need to be linking in with them? And I know that it can't be limitless, I get that. But is there work that could be done to bring in even more communities and get their voice heard?
There is no limit to the number of sub-IAGs that we can have. We can expand them, and we have done already. So we started off originally with 7, and then that grew to 9. When we recognised that we needed to split a couple of groups to get further reach. As I said, the model is embedding and it's settling down, but compared to where we were originally, where we had one solitary IAG, which didn't have a great deal of reach, when we look at what we've got now, it's a far deeper, far wider approach, and I'm happy and content that if further communities come forward, and identify that they feel it will be of a benefit to them, I'm absolutely supportive of us standing up further independent advisory groups from that sense to provide us with that rich data so that we can support them and keep them safe. That's the really important thing for me. The other point that I would say is that through the revised neighbourhood model, the intention is now that engagement is every single one of those 259 neighbourhood officers' responsibilities when they go out there. Their job is to talk, to listen, to learn, and to feed that back in. So we know that there are new and emerging communities out there. We also know at specific times of the year, after certain events that may happen nationally, there may be a requirement for us to focus in on certain areas who are feeling more vulnerable than others, and we will absolutely do that. So from my point of view, the strategic IAG can have as many subgroups as required below it, and I absolutely welcome that.
Okay, thank you for that assurance. Any questions from Angela?
Just a couple of points. In terms of the IAG group, we had a meeting with the transgender communities and signposted them to the IAG LGBTQ because there's a number of engagement they wanted to do with the force. So we actually introduced both together. In terms of engagement, I mean, you know, I've been out engagement with you, with the Arab women. You're great role model. Gary's a great role model as well, engagement for the ethnic minority, but you can't cover everything, both of you can't. It'd be good to look at who the engagement officers are and how are they reaching out to the communities out there and what they actually do, and if there's any kind of support or guidance they require, we're more than happy to help. And with the recruitment, there's quite a few barriers. There is the education, there is the trust and the confidence in the police. So there's a number of barriers out there why they are not joining the police force. But we need a lot more activity in, you know, the cultural events out there, the activities that are going on all year round, and getting that trust and confidence in with the communities. And I think your engagement officers are really important to do that, because there's only two of you here I know who the community trust, and it's not your job to do that actually. But larger events, it's good for you, like Gary goes and speaks to the communities, because they have that trust and confidence with you guys.
I think it's a well, thank you for the point, Angela, first and foremost. And you know, whenever we will do everything we can to get as good a reach as we possibly can. I know that time and distance is sometimes a bit of a challenge, but we will, as you know, whenever there's something going on and people need to see us, we'll be there. But the other thing that we need to look at is, as I mentioned earlier on, probably about 10 minutes ago, is our approach to that engagement, and making sure that we're consistent with it, and making sure that that then feeds in, the pipeline works. That's where we got the success from a few years ago, was by having that connectivity. So how do we feed off it? So for instance, a few weeks ago, the Chief mentioned about community kicks. If there's 500 people playing football, there are going to be, dare I say it, 500 parents somewhere who are going to see a different side to Nottinghamshire Police. And it's how we tap into those people. But you've got to strike while the iron's hot. We cannot then wait and do something retrospectively months later. We've got to be able to engage at that point. There's a lot more work that we're doing through Knots Alert as well, so we can keep feeding out. And it's all of our responsibilities. It's absolutely everyone's responsibility to make sure that we can do something. And what I really am urging all of my neighbourhood officers, as well as response and uniformed services, as well as our detectives, some of whom are in the room, is that when we are out there, just remember that every contact leaves a trace, and you might be the person that changes someone's perceptions about the police and makes them think differently. So it's everyone's responsibility, and if everyone took that little bit away with them, we would be in a far better place than we are currently.
Thank you for that. Is there anything more to add? No? Okay, so I will close that session off. Thank you, ACC Sukverma. Very interesting conversation, and it's clear that there's a lot of work to be done, but there's also a lot of work that is being done, and it's nice to hear the commitment from the Chief Constable to reassure the public that this is an issue that is taken extremely seriously, and we are challenging ourselves to do better. Thank you.